I'm Mike McIntyre, and here's a clip from today's Sound of Ideas. One of the criticisms of the Clean Power Plan is that it's going to cost a lot of money. The Obama administration said it'll actually save customers something like $85 a year on their bills. A lot of that is through efficiency. But there's also talk that it would be very costly for power plants or power organizations such as yours, and then ultimately to ratepayers to implement these things. So what about costs? Will ratepayers bear the brunt of this?
Unfortunately, I think there is going to be a lot of pressure on costs, and when you talk about that, you got to look beyond just the energy source itself. As we've retired a number of these power plants across our grid over the last 3 to 5 years, it's required a significant build-out of the transmission and distribution grid to bring the power back to those areas that those power plants were retired in. So there's much more to the cost than just looking at the energy source itself, and I'm hoping that the regulators are taking a look at the entire package when they build that. But there's going to be significant pressure on costs.
And last question. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think a lot of those costs would be there whether this plan wasn't in place anyway, because a lot of those plants are getting older. And the grid itself has needed infrastructure updates and refresh, and obviously our population is shifted and where industry is located and so on. So I think a lot of those investments are going to have to happen over the next, we're talking a period here of at least 15 years. So you're not going to have no investments in it without the EPA plan.
Can I ask Charles a question, though? I mean, given that he's the expert and knows what's happening with the grid, is it not true that if you increase the amount of electricity being supplied by wind, solar, and other intermittent renewable technologies, you increase the costs of grid management and require additional spinning reserves, which is costly?
Yes, you hit on an additional point in the total cost picture. First, as I reach out further and further to these generation sources, whether they be wind, solar, or others, and try to transport that power over a longer distance, it's going to cost more from a transmission and distribution system perspective. But I think there's a number of countries, Germany included, that have demonstrated that by putting more pressure on the grid to use wind and solar and other renewables, that you still have to have baseload capacity that's dispatchable and can start up and back up those power sources when they're not able to generate electricity. So you actually increase the capacity on the grid that is sitting idle for those periods when those sources aren't available.
But you also can use the distributed nature of technologies like solar also, so that you don't have to transmit electricity as far or put it closer to where the demand is as well too. So I think there is trade-offs, and I agree that the grid needs to be upgraded, no doubt about it. Again, we've got an infrastructure that's been in place for decades now, but PJM themselves have done that modeling and said that they could go up to 30% on the grid within the PJM service area without major impacts on the stability of the grid. Obviously, we want to make the grid smarter, and we want to start integrating storage and such into the grid too, so we can meet peak demands and capacity issues.
For more great Sound of Ideas conversation, go to ideastream.org/SOI.